A great leader can say, this isn't working to someone else without it wrapping up into 12 disclaimers first of why. Feedback is just data. It's not a verdict on your worth. And the moment that you detach your identity actually from the input, you become almost impossible to rattle. That's when people actually trust you with the truth because they know that you can hold it without falling apart. I see women fall apart all the time. We have to give feedback kindly, and also we have to be willing to receive it. Everything that is happening or whatever you're frustrated with, the situation, the employee, the vendor, the friend, it's co-created. It takes two to get to that situation, right? And so if it takes two, also have the opportunity to listen. Go in knowing that you're there for a solution, not there to just rant and dump on the person. I always say, it's you and me against the problem, not you and me against each other. All right, we're just gonna cold open here because I wanna talk about something today that I think is truly one of the biggest things holding women back in business and in life. And guess what? It's not funding. It's not strategy. It's not even confidence. It's that we are terrified, listen to this, terrified of direct conversations. We ghost instead of ending things clearly. We gossip instead of saying it to the person's face. We ignore instead of addressing it. We assume instead of just asking. We triangulate instead of just going directly. We build entire stories in our head that were never actually even real. And I want to name that today because that pattern and that avoidance, I see this so often, not only in interactions that I've had with women, but because I lead the community inside of CEO School, inside of Millionaire Founders Club, and I see women interact all day long. And I think it's the actual thing that holds us back compared to men. And that's the difference between being just a founder or a woman in business to actually being a leader or a CEO. So today's episode, let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about the lessons that I've seen and heard and what we can all do better as women to stop falling into this trap that's holding us back. Okay, so here's lesson one, and it's truly the simplest one. Leaders, pick up the phone. Not a text, not a series of voice notes, the phone. I say this because a voice note lets you say what you need to say without ever actually having to sit in someone else's real-time reaction. It's one directional. And so are texts. It feels safe, but that's not leadership. That's a monologue. Leaders actually call. Leaders sit face to face. They give feedback and they're willing to receive feedback too. In the same room, in real time, with no delay button to hide behind it or an email to send. And honestly, if you can't have the conversation live, ask yourself if you actually believe what you're saying or if you're just trying to get it off your chest. I see this so often, and I think it's one thing that has to change. Things that are super lengthy should not be in text or in an email format or in a voice note even. There's times for that. But if there's any sort of conflict, any sort of feeling, have the guts to just pick up the phone and call. And do it from a sense of a win-win. And I'm going to talk about that in the next few segments, but we have to get comfortable in picking up the phone. All right, lesson number 2 is that you can give direct feedback with kindness, right? And you can receive direct feedback without collapsing or turning it into World War III. Those two things are not in tension. We've just been taught that they are. A great leader can hear, this isn't working. And it doesn't translate into her ear as, I'm not enough, this person's crazy. A great leader can say, this isn't working to someone else without it wrapping up into 12 disclaimers first of why. Feedback is just data. It's not a verdict on your worth. And the moment that you detach your identity actually from the input, you become almost impossible to rattle. That's when people actually trust you with the truth because they know that you can hold it without falling apart. I see women fall apart all the time. We have to give feedback kindly, and also we have to be willing to receive it. Everything that is happening or whatever you're frustrated with, the situation, the employee, the vendor, the friend, it's co-created. It takes two to get to that situation, right? And so if it takes two, also have the opportunity to listen. Go in knowing that you're there for a solution, not there to just rant and dump on the person. Lesson number 3, and this is a reframe I use constantly, Every time I sit and I have a conflict or there's something I need to resolve, I always say, it's you and me against the problem, not you and me against each other. So when I'm going to start a conversation, I always start by saying, hey, I want to talk about something. I want to be direct, and I want you to know that I'm looking for a win. I'm looking for a solution, and it's you and me against the issue. So we're going to work through this. You and I are friends, or you and I are a team. You and I have a great relationship, whatever the relationship is. I settle that first so that it takes the person off of their guard, off of the defense, right? You have to be willing to do that and say, okay, now let's talk about what the problem actually is. And we can talk about it without it being personal then. Half of what actually feels like conflict is just a communication gap every single time. Every single time. It's not a character flaw. It's not a betrayal. It's just a gap in communication. Go find the win-win before you actually assume the worst case scenario. And honestly, just give people benefit of the doubt. If 1%, what's the good? What's the 1% truth that you can give that person before you have that conversation also settles your own nervous system to come at it with empathy. And I don't see women doing that. Honestly, most "she did this to me" stories fall apart the second you ask one direct question out loud, instead of asking it silently in your own head 10 times, right? The stories are brewing in our head. And even sometimes when I'm having the conversation, I'll say, hey, I want to check in. The story in my head is blank. That, whatever. Maybe it says that you don't want to do this, or that you don't like me, or that this incident happened and you didn't want to do whatever. That's just a story in my head. And validate that story. Come from a place of love. And instead what we do is we have the story in our head, and then we start building resentment, and we're like, oh yeah, of course this is the story. And of course she did whatever. And we're looking for validation proofs against our own story versus actually just nipping it under the bud and just having the conversation. Men do this so easily. They're able to so easily move on from a conflict, move on from friction, move on from something, and just back to business or back to work or back to friendship. It's not always life or death. And that is lesson number 4. And this is the one that I see the most. And it costs women just everything, I think. It costs you relationships. It costs you mental energy. It costs you money. It costs you time and a lot of emotional distress. So the thing that I see that women do the most is that they're either super happy or they're super furious. There's no middle. A dinner reservation getting canceled and a 7-figure deal falling apart is the same emotional intensity, because there's just no dial. There's just an on switch and an off switch, on switch and an off switch, on switch and an off switch, just an on switch or an off switch. Literally, check in with yourself on that, because I know it's true for you. It happens to me also so often, but we can't live in that 0 or 100. We can't. We have to be willing to have that dial. Everything isn't 0 or 100. And leadership requires that dial. It requires us being able to be unhappy without being unhinged. It requires us to be able to we might be disappointed, but we don't need to disappear, right? We don't need to just ghost or leave and end the relationship, end the friendship, end the whatever. It requires proportion. Because if your reaction to a small miss and a major breach look identical, people stop trusting your signal. You have to be able to calibrate. It's so important. And I see this all the time with women. I've had so many relationships that everything's good. And you can even count them until the last one bad thing that didn't happen or go your way. Then that bad thing, we didn't follow the steps that I just gave. We didn't validate. We didn't check the story. We just made assumptions, let the story pan out. And then you're like, oh yeah, now this person's a total bitch. Now this thing is totally not going to work. The whole thing is a disaster, and it's cut loose by. I've had this happen with mentee relationships. I've had this happen in teams. I've had this happen with people that have worked for me. I've had this happen in friendships, right? And every time I actually look and I've zoomed out, it's with women. It's either 0 or 100. We have to stop, ladies. We have to be willing to know the dial. And honestly, the last lesson, which I think is the biggest one of all and why I saved it for here, life is short. Life is really short. I lost my dad at 57. These things sometimes don't really matter. The amount of overlap in everyone's network is actually really real. You think that there isn't an overlap in network and you can ditch the person and burn the bridge and end the relationship, but it's not. Everyone knows everyone eventually. And your reputation, this is the thing that I feel like I've been taught my whole life. This is the integrity piece. This is like my immigrant values. Like, your reputation matters the most, and your reputation will outlast every deal, every launch, every disagreement, every vendor, every person that you'll ever have something with. Your reputation matters. Now, I'm also not saying that you have to people please and, just to keep the bridge or have fake, and that's something that I've worked through over the last several years, is setting my own boundaries, knowing my own worth, and not people pleasing. But I go so out of my way I'm not burning bridges. I'm not burning it all down. I always leave the door open. I always exit gracefully. Even if it is with anything disgruntled, exit with grace, because it's so important. And you don't know how many times things circle back and come back. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. Someone I've supported, I've championed, I've opened doors for, hits one bump, one thing, one disagreement, and one moment that didn't go their way, and it goes straight into burn mode. No conversation, no attempt at repair, no what about all of the amazing things that happened for you? Just zero to scorched earth. That's not strength, ladies. That's ego. That's emotion. And it always, always comes back around. So here's the PSA, and it's the whole reason I wanted to record this episode. We are held back, in part by our own avoidance, not because we're less capable, because we haven't built the muscle for direct and uncomfortable, but kind conversations along the way that our male counterparts have. They can have the conversation, they can disagree, but they move forward. They don't torch a relationship over one moment. We have to build that muscle, ladies, not become less emotional. It's to become more precise with it. Say it directly, say it kindly, give benefit of the doubt, say it to their face, and not burn the bridge or talk behind their back. So that's today's class. That's today's episode. I really felt called to do it. So I hope you enjoyed today's lessons in what I'm seeing in communication. But let's start picking up the phone and let's start having real relationships that last over time. I'll see you next week on another episode of the CEO School Podcast.